the Army issues every Ranger a pair of Belleville hot weather combat boots, Coyote Tan, fully regulation compliant. Standard across the entire force, and almost immediately, most of them throw those boots in a locker and never look at them again. Instead, they reach for Nike SFB Field Ukayas, Garmont T8 Bifidas, Salomon Forces XA MIDs, boots the Army never handed them, boots they paid for out of their own pocket with their own money, because in the Ranger Regiment, what keeps you alive matters more than what keeps you compliant. And if you think elite soldiers just wear whatever the military gives them, this video is going to change everything you believe about combat footwear. Let us get into it fast. Here are the boots that actually show up on Ranger feet in the real world. Nike SFB Airfield Ukaya. 16.7 ounces per boot, yet 0 break-in time. Zoom air cushioning, borrowed straight from athletic shoe technology. This is the boot Ranger instructors themselves recommend for Ranger School, not the issued pair sitting in the supply room. This one. Garmont T8 Bifida. Voted the #1 Ranger school boot by soldiers who actually completed the course and came back to talk about it. Superior traction. Ankle support that locks your foot in place on the worst mountain terrain imaginable. Built to handle crushing loads that would destroy lighter footwear within days. Salomon Forces XA MID, the operator staple of the 75th Ranger Regiment. Lightweight, breathable. Designed for all-day rucking when every single ounce on your feet translates to energy saved or energy lost over miles of movement. Rocky S2V Tactical. Battle-proven across desert and rocky terrain in multiple deployments. Drainage vents that keep water from pooling inside the boot. Leather tough enough to survive months of continuous field use without falling apart. And Oakley SI Light Assault 3. The lightest option in the Ranger toolkit, 14 to 16 ounces. Built for speed in urban environments where agility decides who walks out alive and who gets carried out on a stretcher. Now, here is the part most people never hear. The United States Army spends significant money issuing standard combat boots to every soldier, including Rangers. These boots meet regulation. They pass inspection. They check every single administrative box required. And according to Army surveys, roughly 50% of soldiers across all units reject them anyway. They go out and buy commercial off-the-shelf alternatives instead. Among Rangers and other special operations units, that number climbs even higher. This is not rebellion. This is not some special not attitude. This is not some special forces ego trip. This is survival math rooted in hard experience. Because in the Ranger community, there is a saying that most civilians never hear. Your feet are your primary weapon system, not your rifle, not your night vision device, not your body armor, your feet. If your feet fail, you cannot move. If you cannot move, you cannot fight. If you cannot fight, you become a casualty. Or worse, you become the reason someone else becomes a casualty trying to save you. That is why Rangers treat boot selection the way a Formula One team treats tire selection. It is not personal preference. It is performance engineering for the most demanding conditions on Earth. So what exactly is wrong with the boots the Army issues? Let us talk about the standard Army combat boot, the hot weather Coyote variant, the Belleville 390 and 790 series. These are the boots that show up in your duffel bag on day one of your military career. They weigh between 20 and 25 ounces per boot, sometimes more depending on the size. They require a long and painful break-in period, which means for the first weeks of wear, your feet are fighting the boot instead of fighting the terrain. The ankle support is poor. The cloth ankle panel that is supposed to provide flexibility actually provides instability under heavy load. Breathability is minimal. In desert environments, these boots trap heat against the skin and create hot spots that turn into open blisters within hours of sustained movement under the sun. In wet environments, they absorb water and hold it like a sponge. They do not drain properly. They do not dry fast. And when your feet sit in moisture for 48 hours or more, you're staring at the early stages of trench foot, a condition that can pull a fully capable operator out of a critical mission and into a medical evacuation helicopter. The older Altama issue boots carry similar problems: poor flexibility, inferior terrain grip compared to modern commercial options, a brutal break-in period that punishes your feet before the enemy ever gets the chance to. And basic issue leather temperate boots perform even worse in hot conditions. They trap heat inside. They offer almost no drainage capability. In jungle or swamp operations, they become waterlogged weights strapped to your ankles, dragging your energy reserves down with every step. Now compare that to what rangers actually choose when lives are on the line. The Nike SFB Ukiah is essentially a running shoe disguised as a combat boot. It uses Zoom air cushioning technology, which distributes impact forces across the entire sole with every single step. During a 12-mile ruck march carrying 50 pounds of gear and ammunition, that cushioning is the difference between finishing strong and finishing with bloody socks and raw skin. It dries fast. In jungle and wet environments, rangers consistently report that Nike SFBs shed water faster than any issued boot they have ever worn. The synthetic upper simply does not hold moisture the way leather and heavy canvas do. It breathes in extreme heat, which means fewer hot spots, fewer blisters, and more hours of effective movement before your feet start to degrade and slow you down. The trade-off is real, though. It is less rugged than a full leather boot in extreme abrasion conditions. Rocks and sharp debris can wear through the lighter material faster over time. But for the vast majority of ranger operations, the speed and comfort advantage far outweighs that vulnerability. The Garmont T8 Bifida fills the exact gap where the Nike cannot perform. When the mission involves mountain terrain, heavy loads, or extended multi-day patrols carrying 80 pounds or more on your back, the Garmont is what rangers reach for without hesitation. At 23 ounces, it is noticeably heavier than the Nike. But that weight comes from construction that actually protects the foot and ankle under extreme stress. The traction pattern grips loose rock and wet surfaces better than almost anything else available in the tactical boot market today. The ankle support is rigid enough to prevent dangerous rolls on uneven ground while still allowing natural foot movement during climbs and descents. It handles heavy rucking loads without collapsing, deforming, or losing structural shape. And while it dries slower than the Nike, which means it is not the first choice for sustained jungle operations where moisture is constant, it absolutely dominates in mountain and cold weather environments where structural integrity matters more than breathability. Rangers who have completed mountain phase of Ranger School consistently rank the Garmont T8 as their #1 performer for that specific environment. The Salomon Forces XA MID is something different entirely from both of those options. It looks more like a hiking shoe than a military boot. And that is exactly why 75th Ranger Regiment operators trust it for daily operations. At 15 to 18 ounces, it is lighter than most issued boots by a significant margin. It offers no break-in period at all. You lace it up on day one, and it performs immediately as if you have worn it for months. The breathability is among the best in the entire tactical footwear space. It drains fast after water crossings. It moves with your foot instead of restricting it. For all-day rucking across varied terrain, it delivers a level of sustained comfort that issued boots simply cannot match no matter how long you break them in. The trade-off here is puncture protection. The sole and upper are not designed to stop sharp objects the way a heavy leather boot would. But rangers who wear the Salomon accept that trade willingly, because in most operational environments, the mobility and endurance advantage is worth far more than the marginal increase in sole thickness. Oakley S2V Tactical is the desert specialist in this lineup. Leather construction gives it durability that synthetic boots struggle to match in abrasive sand and jagged rock environments. The drainage vents are critical for desert operations. In conditions where unexpected water crossings or sudden rain can flood a boot completely, the S2V lets water escape through engineered channels instead of pooling against the foot and destroying skin. It requires a short break-in period, But once broken in, it molds to the individual foot in a way that prevents the sliding and friction that cause debilitating blisters during long patrols. Rangers deployed across the Middle East and North Africa trust the S2V because it survives the harshest ground conditions while remaining noticeably lighter and more comfortable than anything the Army issues for those same environments. When temperatures exceed 120 degrees and fine sand infiltrates everything, the S2V keeps performing. While issued boots create the exact conditions that sideline operators and end missions early. Oakley SI Light Assault 3 is the pure speed boot. At 14 to 16 ounces, it is the lightest serious tactical boot available to operators today. Rangers use it for urban operations, direct action raids, and any mission where movement speed is the deciding factor between success and failure. In close quarters battle, a heavy boot slows every transition between positions. It adds unnecessary fatigue during building clearance operations. It increases injury risk when navigating rubble, broken glass, and debris. The Oakley eliminates that drag completely. It moves quietly on hard surfaces. It supports fast rope descents from helicopters. It flexes naturally during climbing and rapid lateral movement. The compromise is obvious. On rough mountain terrain or during extended heavy load patrols, it does not offer enough structural support. But for its intended role in close combat, nothing the Army issues comes close to matching it. There are also occasional appearances of Merrill MQC Force and Keen tactical boots among Rangers operating in specific environments. These are niche choices, used primarily in hot and wet conditions where maximum breathability is the absolute priority above all else. They are not standard Ranger selections, but they appear often enough to prove that the community is constantly testing, evaluating, and refining what works best. Now let us break apart the misconceptions that civilians carry about military footwear. The first and biggest one is that Rangers must wear only what the regiment issues them. That is completely false. Army Regulation 670-1 provides an authorized list of commercial boots that soldiers can legally purchase and wear in uniform. Commanders within the Ranger Regiment have the authority to approve additional commercial options when operational needs demand it. This is not a loophole being exploited. It is a built-in recognition by the Army itself that standard issue does not always meet the standard of performance required for the hardest missions. The second misconception is that all elite units wear identical gear. They absolutely do not. A Ranger preparing for a desert deployment will choose completely different footwear than a Ranger preparing for jungle operations in a different part of the world. Even within a single squad on the same mission, you will see 3 or 4 different boot brands on different feet, depending on individual foot shape, the specific mission profile, and years of personal experience with what works under real stress. The third misconception is that more expensive automatically means better. It does not. The Nike SFB Ukiah costs less than many issued alternatives when you factor in the total cost of replacing boots that fail prematurely in the field, plus the medical costs of treating the injuries those failed boots cause. Rangers are not buying expensive boots to look different or stand out. They are buying specific boots because those boots have proven through repeated punishing field use that they reduce injury rates and increase operational performance in measurable ways. Here is what ties all of this together into a single truth. When a Ranger chooses a boot, that choice is not about fashion. It is not about brand loyalty. It is not about quietly defying regulations for the sake of individuality. It is a calculated and deliberate decision based on one fundamental question. Will this boot keep me effective when everything around me is trying to shut me down? Heat, cold, standing water, sharp rocks, crushing weight, endless distance, accumulating pain. Every one of those factors is actively working to degrade a soldier's ability to move, fight, and survive. The boot is the only barrier between hostile ground and the body's most critical point of contact with that ground. Rangers understand this at a level that most people will never need to consider. A single blister in the wrong location during a combat patrol can slow a soldier's movement speed by 30% or more. A wet boot that refuses to drain properly can cause serious tissue breakdown in under 72 hours of continuous field operations. A heavy boot adds cumulative fatigue that compounds silently over hours and days until a ranger who should be operating at peak capacity is functioning at 70%. And in a firefight, 70% gets people killed. That is the real reason Rangers reject what the Army gives them. Not because they are difficult soldiers, not because they want special treatment or attention, because they have witnessed firsthand what happens when equipment fails at the worst possible moment during the worst possible mission. They have watched teammates pulled from critical operations because their feet gave out long before their willpower did. They have learned through painful, sometimes bloody experience that the boot the Army hands you was designed for cost efficiency across millions of soldiers, was not for peak performance under the worst conditions on Earth. And when your entire job description is to operate in those worst conditions night after night, cost efficiency is simply not good enough. So the next time you see a Ranger lacing up a pair of Nikes or Salomons instead of standard issue Bellevilles, understand what you're actually witnessing. You're watching a professional who has made a deliberate, fully informed decision to prioritize survival over regulation. Performance over paperwork. Function over compliance. And that single decision, made carefully and repeated thousands of times across the regiment every single day, is one of the quiet but powerful reasons Army Rangers remain the most effective and most feared light infantry force operating anywhere in the world today. Their feet never quit on them. Because they refuse to trust a boot that has not earned that trust through absolute punishment and proven battlefield performance,